It's the way this is my third time filming this video because I cannot get it right. What else do I have? Wait, I forgot. Hello book reading friends, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Melanie, and today I bring you the best books of 2020, all my favorite books of 2020, top 13 books to read, however you want to call it. There's so many ways we can call this, but essentially I'm gonna be talking about all the favorite books that I read this year. It was honestly super hard, but easy at the same time to narrow down all of these books. At first, I had a list of 10. There were a few that were left behind, and thankfully, this is my third time filming this video. So at this point, I know exactly what I want to do, how I want to do it, and I've changed the format a little bit so that this is almost like a tier rank situation, because I'm going to be walking you through all the way from 13 to 1. So what is my top favorite book of the year? If you have any guess as to what my favorite book of the year is going to be, please let me know down below, because I am really interested to see if you guys know, okay? Because I be talking about certain books over and over again, and I just really want to know, are you guys paying attention? Before we even start, I do want to say, I don't know how many other books I will read before the year is over. There's still a few more days to the year, so there will be a tier ranking all of the books that I read in 2020 at the beginning of January, so just stay tuned. You know, that is coming very, very soon. If you have yet to subscribe to my channel, don't forget to do so down below for more bookish content. I constantly upload videos that I'm sure you do not want to miss. Book hauls, book reviews, reading vlogs. What else do? I be all over the place, okay? This is a chaotic time over here, so I'm sure you won't want to miss any of that. I am also sprinting throughout the week, every Friday particularly, and I may sprinkle in there some other days of the week. The way y'all are gonna be so happy, because starting from this week, actually, I'm gonna start sprinting in the morning. I don't know if every Friday will be in the morning, but I do know I will be switching it up and doing morning sprints as well. I just loved having breakfast with you and reading with you. It was definitely the best of times. And you can also follow me on all of my social medias. They are always linked down below. I have a Twitter, Goodreads, Instagram, and an Amazon wish list. And yeah, without further ado, let's get right started into the video. Take your guesses. Okay, I want to hear your guesses down in the comments. It's gonna be juicy. The way I'm just gonna be peeping these comments as this video goes up, I want to know your guess. Okay, let's get started, and we'll start with number 13. And at number 13, okay, lucky number 13. It's really a lucky number. I feel like it's associated with like not so many lucky things, but lucky number 13, okay, we have Redwater Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Now, when I first came up with this list, this book was not originally there. I did give this book a 4 out of 5 stars when I read this. This book is definitely one of my favorite romances, dare I say, of all time. In this book, we follow the first son of the United States, Alex Claremont Diaz, as he has this rivalry enemy relationship with Prince Henry from the United Kingdom. And they have had this ongoing feud during years. But once they make a public display of that feud, and the cameras and the media all catch that, both of their PR teams come together, they come up with a plan to try and calm down that wave of media and to make them pretend to have a friendship very, very publicly, that suddenly starts turning into a lot more between these two political figures. I just loved everything about this book. I think the dialogue, like the banter in here, was done so incredibly well. And if you know me, I just love those character dynamics. When the dialogue feels realistic and that banter is just thing after thing, I just love reading that, especially in romances. I feel like banter is definitely one of the things that need to be executed really, really well, especially with that trope of hate to love. And in here, that is so perfect. And the side characters are also really well developed. Like, everyone shines in their own right. The parental relationships in here are just immaculate as well. Like the way that Alex gets along with his parents, I absolutely loved. There is also that element of political escapism, because in this book we have the first female president of the United States. So it's also, again, escapism. There is also something that I love reading about in books, particularly romances, and I don't think I find that quite enough, is that dynamic of like email exchange, like text messages, like very steamy, like very provocative. That is in this book, but it also has a way of being like so beautiful. Like, there are so many quotes that I got from this book, and the romance is also like hella steamy, okay? This was definitely a hard one to rank, but I think as I was staring at books, like, I just knew exactly where to place them. But this one came at number 12. It is still very much a 5-star. I love the heck out of this book, and I will will recommend it left and damn right. And I'm talking about The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. In this book, we follow Rin, who is a peasant girl, and Rin has honestly been just like a means to an end throughout her entire life. She has constantly been abused in her household because she is an orphan, and so to escape that life, she prepares herself very heavily to take the Empire-wide test to find youth for different military academies, except that Rin aces the Keju and she actually gets into the Synagogue, which is the most elite academy in all of the Empire. And when poor Rin gets there, she is now targeted by her peers because of her race, her gender, and her poverty. So she can never truly escape that cruelty that she had back home. But once she is there, she realizes that she possesses the ancient art of shamanism, which is forbidden in this world. And there's one particular god that is trying to claim her, which is the Phoenix, except this god is very vengeful and is always looking for bloodshed. And with the third Poppy War approaching, Rin is truly one of the only hopes they have at winning. But again, that god is truly messing with everything. This book is a mix between historical fiction and then fantasy. I think R.F. Kuang really threw this out of the park. Not only does it paint the picture of war so incredibly well, it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It is very straightforward in its writing. It is truly meant to depict how cruel war can be and how it affects the mind of a human being. And it was so fascinating to see that journey of every single character in this book, because all of these characters have amazing character arcs. This is inspired on the event of the rape of Nanking, so just beware of that. There are a lot of trigger warnings in this book. I will leave them down below in the description. I also have an entire reading vlog, spoiler free, dedicated to the entire trilogy, which the third book came out this year. And if you want to watch that, I will also leave that linked down below. But I think one of my favorite parts of this book, which I know wasn't a lot of people's favorites, was the training aspect in the academy. I just absolutely love seeing characters progress, seeing them train. And I think out of the 3 books, this one, particularly chapter 21, which is the heaviest one, truly shows you how horrific war is, and it truly shows you a side of history that hasn't been outwardly spoken for many years and that has hurt a lot of people. So everything about this book is just 10 out of 10. At number 11, and I didn't think this book was gonna be like so low in the rank list, because most of these, the majority of these, except for Red, White, and Royal Blue, if I'm not mistaken, are 5 stars. I didn't expect this book to be 11. I thought this was gonna be higher, but when I compare it to other books, those books definitely shine a lot more than this one. But at number 11, I have The Invisible Life of Addy LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This book definitely hit me very hard because, and I've talked about this before, like it's not a secret, one of my biggest fears is I was very young has always been to die without making a real impact in the world, whether it was being remembered or like making something significant to make a change. I've always been super afraid of that, and I think the premise of this book really called to me in that sense, because Addy as a character is one that fears that as well. So in this book we do follow, again, Addy LaRue, who lives in the 1700s, and she is living a life that she does not want to live. She is being forced to marry. She truly does not want to do that, and so she makes a Faustian bargain with a god that answers after dark that she has been warned against countless of times. And once she makes that deal for immortality so that she could live her life freely as she wanted, he grants her the deal, but she doesn't realize it comes with a catch. The catch is that she will never be remembered by anyone that she speaks to, and it won't be until 300 years later in a very small hidden bookstore in New York City that for the first time she is remembered by a boy called Henry. Not a boy, a man. And I just adored the heck out of this book. I think there is such, it's not completely lyrical, but I do think there is a lyrical aspect to this writing that resonated with me because it was so beautiful. And again, the story of Addy and the concept of not being remembered, and the way that V.E. Schwab just painted that picture in this book. There were so many quotes that just, they impacted me so much. I was just crying because in a way, I felt like in a way I also needed to hear those words from someone. One of my favorite parts of the book was definitely seeing the god that answers after dark, Luce. I just loved seeing him. I would have loved to see a lot more of him in this book though. His scenes were some of the ones that shone the most. I genuinely think his dynamic with Addy was really compelling. And on the other end of things, we have Henry. Henry is very soft-spoken and Henry just wants to be loved. He just wants to be appreciated. And again, his dynamic with Addy, it was just these two people were meant to find each other to show exactly what they could have, exactly what they could be. This book is very character driven. The plot solely depends on Addy to happen. If it's not for Addy, this plot literally would not exist. At number 10, another book that I thought would be higher on my list. When I saw this, I was like, I mean, it's top 10, but it can't be higher because I have other books in my top 5 percentile. And my number 10 is actually Scythed by Neil Shusterman, another book that just became one of my all-time favorites this year. This is like a light sci-fi meets dystopia in a world where hunger is no longer a thing. They've defeated war, they've defeated death, people can no longer die of natural causes, and the only way that people can die is if a scythe actually gleans them. And glean is the word that they use for killing, essentially for taking alive. And scythes are these very special figures that are elected actually kind of like at random. Like you do have to be worthy in some way, like you need to have your morals really straight in order to get into the scythedom. And once you are chosen, you are actually introduced to the scythedom where you need to train for months with a scythe. So in this book in particular, we follow Citra and Rowan, who are our main characters, as they are both invited into the scythedom for their apprenticeship. I think in particular the themes that Neil Shusterman manages to pack into this book, there are themes of war and humanity and race and poverty and corruption. It was so interesting to read about a scenario in such a futuristic world as to what would happen if we ever, as humanity, as society, got to a point where death is no longer a thing and our government looks different, because in this world they are being ruled by the Thunderhead, which is this sentient being, computer type thing. And it was just so interesting to look at all of those elements and kind of reflect into what would actually happen in real life if this were a thing. It was also incredibly fascinating to see some of these characters and how they are morally gray, because the job actually presents itself to be morally gray at one point or another. So I just found this completely just fascinating all around. Next up, book number 9, we actually have an adult romance, a contemporary adult situation. And the way I knew this book was gonna be in this list way before I even started Booktube, because I actually read this book before I started my channel this year, and it is actually All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. The way this book completely shattered me, like it destroyed me. In All Your Perfects, we follow Quinn and Graham, who are a married couple. They've been married for years, and at the point where the book starts, their marriage is basically in shambles, except that they are trying to fix it. They just don't know exactly how to get to that point where they were before. Oh my god, the amount of tears I let out reading this book was absolutely unreal. I actually adored the way that the book was set up. We do get chapters in the past, and then we get chapters present time. So we get to see Quinn and Graham as they meet, and we get that timeline all the way up to where they are now. It was so interesting to read about that. And we also, I don't think I'd ever read a book like that, where we start with the characters being in their early 20s all the way up to like their early mid 30s. I think this book in particular really made me think about the dynamic of marriage and relationships and the way that nothing is really black or white, and how this book talks about communication and partnership and companionship was just written in such a beautiful way. I found that there was almost like a poetic element to this book. Here's the thing, Quinn as a main character was super frustrating to read about, because this book does include that miscommunication trope, and it was so frustrating to see from her perspective and how she was not communicating with Graham, but at the same time it was understandable due to all the things that she was going through. There are some trigger warnings in here for miscarriage and infertility. That is one of the bigger themes addressed in this book. There is also infidelity, so just beware of all of those before you go into this book. That book is just perfect, okay? All Your Perfects. At number 8, we actually have The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And in this book, we follow Xiomara Batista, who has grown up in a very sheltered life. Xiomara has grown up in a very religious family who doesn't allow her to do much, to explore much outside of the community that she lives in, outside of her parents' beliefs, particularly her mom. Her mom is the more strict one. But once her school opens a slam poetry club, she actually realizes the power of words through poetry, and she refuses to stay silent after joining this club. I have talked about this book before many times. I don't think I'll ever shut up about this book either. This book truly made me feel seen so much in literature. I don't think I've ever read a book like that just made me bawl my eyes out from page 5. Like, I was just weeping at how personal this book felt. I felt like so many parts of this book were written for me, to me. And the way that Elizabeth Acevedo also also narrates this book just makes it hit even harder. This book really talks a lot about being a woman and how you navigate systems doing that, and it has a lot of familial dynamics. It is not that strong in its plot, though. I would say this is very character driven in comparison to other works by Elizabeth Acevedo, but I think that's what made it hit harder, because it is very character driven and you are very much inside Xiomara's head, and this is a story about finding yourself and finding your own voice, and that journey with Xiomara was stunning. At number 7, also another book. I thought this was going to be my all-time favorite book of this year, and it was actually heavy knocked down by some of my later reads. I was not expecting that at all, and I don't think any of you were either. So I don't know if you're ready for me to put this at number 7, because it is actually Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. So take your guesses right now as to what's gonna be my number 1, because I know a lot of you must have said Cemetery Boys. And in Cemetery Boys, we follow Yadriel, who is a trans boy and a brujo, and his family is having a really hard time embracing his gender and embracing him and accepting him as a brujo. So in order to prove himself as a real brujo, he partners up with his cousin Maritza to raise the ghost of a dead family member. But instead, Yadriel, being Yadriel, honestly, because that's the only reason, he ends up summoning the ghost of the school's resident bad boy called Julian Diaz, who actually has no idea that he's dead. He doesn't know that he died, and he is not that willing to go back to the dead because he needs Maritza and Yadriel to help him find out exactly how he died, why he died, when he died, so he can go back to the dead peacefully. I adored the way that Aidan Thomas grabbed Latinx culture and implemented that in the story, particularly quinceañeras. Like, I never really thought about how quinceañeras would be incorporated in a more fantastical setting, and I say that very loosely because although this is a fantasy, it's still a set kind of like in the urban contemporary world. So definitely for fantasy readers who are just starting out, this is a great way to start. So again, the way that he grabbed that and just warped it in a way to fit his story was fantastic. I was definitely not expecting that, and I loved that. The way that he grabbed Mexican culture in general and included that in this book to fit ghosts and brujex and just everything to do with El Día de los Muertos. Everything was just so well done in this book. This book was also incredibly atmospheric. Like, the cemetery that this book takes place in, the house in which they live, the food that they were preparing, I definitely felt myself there. It was so crazy how atmospheric this book was. It's also super short. It's a very quick read, but the character dynamics in this book actually shine so much. The banter, again, which is something that I love between Maritza and Julian in particular, they were just incredible together. Like, the way they were just cracking me up and making me laugh left and right. The romance was also incredibly well paced for such a short amount of time, because I do think this book takes place within a span of 3 days or a week. I can't remember. It takes place during Dia de los Muertos. So most definitely the romance was done exceptionally well. Not only that, the plot twist at the end, I kind of saw it coming, but not the way it happened. So overall, just a fantastic read. I just had to include this next book in here because this book, the ending truly messed me up. It was the way that I was always right about the plot twist, and they just deterred me from it, only to confirm it at the end of the second book. And at number 6, we have The Vanishing Star by Maureen Johnson. This is the second installment in the Truly Devious series. In Truly Devious, we follow Stevie Bell, who loves true crime. She is in love with Agatha Christie, in love with Sherlock Holmes. She yearns to one day be like them, to be like those stories that have been written for years that are so fantastic in the true crime community. And one day she receives an invitation to Ellingham Academy, which is this very prestigious academy that only invites the best of the best at their fields to study there. All expenses paid. They don't need to pay for anything. Not only that, but they provide every resource that these students need. And Stevie actually agrees to attend this school primarily because of one thing. 80 years in the past, a case was opened. A crime happened. However, it has never been solved, and it revolves around the founder of this academy called Mr. Ellingham, when his daughter and wife were kidnapped and murdered. Stevie agrees to go here because she is determined to find out exactly what happened 80 years in the past. This book just righted every wrong that there was in book 1. In this book, we start out and there's a ton of that character dynamic, a ton of that banter, just a ton of those characters that I started falling in love with in book 1. The way Nate and Stevie are just so friendly, but their chemistry is just fantastic, and their banter and their dialogue, I really want Nate and Stevie to get together. Then we have David, who I was so mad about throughout the entirety of the book, book because David in this book really showed us how cruel he can be. There is something about David that still to this day does not convince me. He's just so self-centered and selfish. Completely despise David in this book. And then towards the middle of the book onwards, it was really about that plot, incorporating those character dynamics, plot twist at the end. I really was not expecting that due to the ending of Truly Devious, but the way my theory was correct all damn long, and they really made me doubt myself. They really made me doubt my theory, only to prove me right at the end of this book. I was going berserk on a live stream reading this. I just love how this book moves between past and present, and we truly sometimes get to see stuff before Stevie does. So it's almost like, Stevie, get there, you're almost there. And it's, oh my god, it's such a thrilling ride because it's almost when you're like watching horror movies and you know the killer is right there and you're just like, run girl, run. That is how I felt with Stevie. We're gonna get into the juicy section of this video now. We're talking about the top 5%, the top 5 percentile. We're talking about the top 5 books that I read this year. All of these books emotionally destroyed me. I was distraught. So you will see a common theme of freak out, tears, and just emotions with all of these books because I'm about to go crazy talking about these. Can you guess what number 5 is? Take your places, people. Take your bet. At number 5, we have A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is a part of the From Blood and Ash series where we follow Poppy, who is a maiden, and Poppy was chosen by the gods from the womb to fulfill this destiny, this role as the maiden, a figure that is connected to every single ascension in the kingdom. This ascension is very much mysterious to everyone but the king and queen. Nobody truly knows what happens in the ascension, only that is mandatory, only that Poppy is connected, and only that they look at Poppy almost in this godlike, glowing, holy way, and therefore they cannot speak to her, they cannot address her, they cannot touch her, approach her. Poppy is off limits to absolutely everyone in the kingdom. And so to ensure the day of her ascension, the king and queen actually assign her a royal guard by the name of Hawk Flynn, and once she meets Hawk, she starts feeling things that she'd never felt before. This is a new adult fantasy romance, and oh my god, this second book. First off, the writing in here just by far improved from the first one. Right off the bat, you can see how Poppy's voice matured in this book, which is one of my favorite things to read about. Like, I just want to see that character progression, and it was very much present in A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. We also get a lot of world expansion in this book that we didn't particularly see in book 1. Since this book is being told in first person, we are only seeing what Poppy is figuring out as she goes. So in this book, as she learns more info, we are thrust deeper into this world, and it was so very fascinating to see Jennifer L. Armentrout just grab all of these common creatures and themes in paranormal or supernatural or fantasy books and warp them in a way to make it her own and to just fit her own story. The steam in this book is out of this world. I just love how Poppy fits in with these set of characters way better than in book 1. Just, you find yourself caring for these characters, or at least I did, a lot more this time around. Plot twist at the end of this book was absolutely insane. Like, I was not expecting that at all. I had guessed that plot twist, but not in the way that it was delivered. In this book, we also get Castile, and Castile will be the end of me. Castile is so smooth, and he is just straightforwardly honest, and he just has so much sex appeal and power. The battle scenes, oh my god, this one line that Castile tells Poppy, kill more people than me and make me feel incompetent princess. The way I didn't know I needed that line ever. I also have a reading vlog up for From Blood and Ash and Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, both the books, spoiler free. Leave a link down below. I know you want to check it out, so I'll link that. At number 4, we have probably one of the books that left me the most broken this year. It is actually by the empty space behind me, Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas, the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series. I finished this damn book and I stared at my wall for a straight hour. I wish I was kidding. I was bawling my eyes out on the couch, and then I transferred myself to my room. I just laid in bed and I just stared at my bookshelf. I was like, what should I pick up next? Next time I sent somebody a voice note, I can't remember who it was. I was like, wait, it's been an hour since I finished this damn book. And this particular book in the series, god damn, I just want to punch it over and over again. Miss Maas did that. Miss Maas really came for my heart, tugged it out of my chest, stomped on it, and then walked away happily strolling. Manon and Dorian. Let me just start there. 2 characters that I truly had not cared for the entirety of the series. And then I'm out here being being like, okay, Manon and Dorian, I love y'all, like both separately and together, and just like the dynamics with both of these characters. Dorian truly went through some scarring, just traumatic events in Queen of Shadows, and the way that he is handling himself here, I don't think we're truly seeing Dorian at his peak. I think he is truly gonna shine in Kingdom of Ash, like he should. And then Manon is truly someone that I hadn't cared about before. Like Manon, I think in this book in particular, first off, the plot twist with Manon was not expected at all. There is a certain level of vulnerability to Manon because she truly does care, particularly for the 13 and for a lead too. She is out here caring, okay? Showing some sort of humanity for somebody who doesn't have a heart. And then of course we have Aelin and Rowan, who in this book just tugged at my heartstrings. Oh my god, Miss Mass really did the same thing that she did in Akamath at the end with this book, and I was not ready for that. Oh my god, the desperation and the way that Rowan just pulled through in this book and did his own thing, and he shined in his own right at the end, and just the way that Rowan constantly thinks that he cannot offer anything because he has nothing left to give, and he goes around at the end and he does that. Look, the ending of this book, I just thinking about it, it makes me want to cry. It was one of the best endings that I've read about because I was really not expecting that. I was not okay. The battle scenes in this book were also incredible. I think the action scenes, like the battle scenes in this book, have worked out the best out of any of the other books. It felt so dynamic and fast-paced and entertaining, but it was also so stressful because the stakes were so high for everyone. And then we also have Aedion and Lysandra. Lysandra in this book? Lysandra really be out here doing the most in this book, okay? The way that Lysandra just quickly climbed up the ranks and has become one of the most important characters in the series. And now that we're in the top 3, if you couldn't already guess by the empty spot behind me, can you guess what number 3 is? It's actually Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, also by Miss Mass. Because Miss Mass literally took over my 2020 and she said, you're gonna read all of my books this year. There's a whole reread vlog, spoiler free, for this book. This book hit harder the second time around, I will say. I did read this book earlier in the year, but the way that I just sobbed even harder the second time around, like I already knew everything that was gonna happen, but I definitely do think it's one of those books that is meant to be reread. You catch all of those subtle foreshadowings, all of those little hints. You fall in love with the characters even harder. And in this book, we follow Bryce Quinlan, who is half Fae and half human, and she truly leads what looks like the perfect life. She has the job, has the friends, she is a party girl, the socialite. She also gets all the men left and right. They would literally bow at her feet. But once a tragedy ravages the city, Bryce finds herself in the midst of a murder investigation alongside Hunt Athalar, who is a fallen angel, and they must work together to try and solve this very big mystery that is making this city fall apart at the seams. I really do think this is Miss Mass's most ambitious work to date. This book is jam-packed with world building. However, the world building is not hard to follow in the slightest. Out of all of her books, I think this is the best one in terms of character dynamics and how the characters are constructed to not only complement each other so well, but to again stand on their own 2 feet, regardless of the fact if they are side characters or main characters. I truly found myself so attached to these characters so quickly, and I don't think that's ever happened in any other book. Their romance was really well paced in this book. It was not insta-lovey. It was not rushed at all. It is almost like sprinkled onto the story. It is not the focal point of this story. It is a very minimal subplot. I think the story is more about companionship and friendship, and that's what truly shines with Crescent City, is that aspect of friendship between Bryce and Danica, who really have just this indestructible bond that I have never seen in any fantasy book out there. And I'm just really excited to see how this whole series will continue. I think the ending in particular was one of the things that just completely shattered me. I was sobbing because, again, the power of friendship in this book is just out of this world. The mystery in this book was also not that easy to figure out. I think there was one point in the story where I was like, oh, I think this is where it's going. And even then I wasn't quite sure. I think it's easier to see where the story is going in regards to that foreshadowing the second time time around reading, when you're reading for the first time, you truly do not see it coming. Like, it's very hard to catch it. So I'm just over the moon excited about this book and every book to follow in this series. And again, I do have a spoiler-free reading vlog on this. Okay, people, now we're down to the top 2 books of the year. I don't know if y'all at this point in time know what my top 2 books are going to be. At number 2, I have a book that I was not expecting to love. And the way that this book turned around for me so quickly, right from the start, was absolutely insane. And I am talking about Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. The way I was not expecting to love this book, like in the slightest. In this book, we follow the perspective of Chaol. He is a very prominent character towards the beginning of the series, and he does get his own arc in this book. Like, this is Chaol's time to shine, and shine he did. And we follow Chaol after the events of Queen of Shadows. That is where we start this book at. In fact, when we start this book, we are kind of a little bit behind to where Empire of Storms ended. So it kind of does have that crossed plot line because this does happen a little bit before the ending of the previous book. Chaol has always been a character that I didn't particularly enjoy because of his nature. He was in this love triangle with Dorian and Selena, and it was just not enjoyable in my opinion. It was very much forced. Then we enter this book and he is actually in this weird relationship with Nesrin because Chaol was very toxic and very rude to Nesrin. He definitely did not appreciate her. It was all about that release, almost just to have somebody there for the sake of having somebody there. And when we get to this book, we truly see Chaol in a very vulnerable, just shut down state, very different to where he started. And Irene was truly Chaol's redemption. Like, the way that Irene just was out there telling Chaol things straight as they were. She was telling him left and right, and these two people became a unit. The companionship, the camaraderie, the love, the dynamic between these two characters was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. This is truly a story about healing and finding your place in a world that is so vast and complicated and cruel and just unkind, and how it just takes a little bit of patience to find that one person who is going to compliment you the most. And not only that, but the plot twist in this book, yo, the word hadn't even theorized about that plot twist. All of these characters are so well established by now that I truly just don't question them at all. And when that plot twist dropped right at the end, I wanted to chuck this book out the damn window because I was really not expecting that in the darn slightest. That plot twist messed me up. And then on the other hand, with Nesrin, we have Sartak, and the way Sartak was always there for Nesrin when she needed him the most was also such a beautiful dynamic. I feel Nesrin at parts was not being that useful, but towards the end, Nesrin was the one really pulling through for these people. Everything about this book was just stunning. And then at number 1, we have, I think by now it must be obvious, but maybe not for all of you, These Violin Delights by Chloe Gong. A book that quickly climbed up the ranks because of how good it is. It is a Shakespearean retelling, a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai, where we follow rivaling gangs, the White Flowers and the Scarlet Gang, with their rival heirs, Roma and Juliet, as they have, of course, a lot of history and a lot of past running to catch up with them. Not only that, we also have a monster on the loose trying to annihilate everything in its path, and these two will have to set that rivalry and those guns aside in order to partner up and figure out exactly what this creature is that is killing everyone in their gangs and how to solve it. This book had a lot of things that I genuinely really enjoy in books. First off, that political intrigue in here was immaculate. Like, the vibes were just outstanding. From the sounds of it, from what I've heard on the media, this political landscape is very much accurate to how it looked like back in the 1920s. So that was fascinating to read about. Not only that, but the romance in here was also incredible because although it is not the main aspect of the book truly, because for the majority of the book, these two people are not even together, we just have inklings of that past and we have those flashbacks and then a little bit of progress. The chemistry between these two characters, although we don't really get to see them a lot in the past, was just so palpable throughout the entirety of the book. And when that happens, yo, you've got my heart, because it's really hard to write characters that have chemistry but you don't show their relationship as it was. The monster in here was also disgusting. Like, I was genuinely just like nauseated. It was just not pretty. Like, it was really bad. And Roma is a soft boy. Like, y'all, the way Roma like is so infatuated infatuated and so in love with Juliet, and then Juliet is really the badass of this relationship. She be pulling out the guns and the knives and she's ready to kill, she is ready to slaughter, and I am just, oh my god, I absolutely loved that about this book. I love seeing the girl being the stronger figure who is ready for anything and just has to pull through even for this guy. And then every other side character in here, I think we have Rosalind is her name, the cousin, and then we have Marshall and Benedict. All of them, just the characters in here were like great. I loved this book so much. I'm really not out here reading a lot of Shakespeare retellings, like retellings in general, but I think I genuinely loved the way that this stood on its own. Like, yes, it grabbed the original story, but the way that it grabbed a lot of cliches and a lot of classical elements of the story and warped it in a way that it was almost like jabbing at it and made it its own. I truly do have to commend Chloe Gong for that. The bloodshed and the gangs, it was all just so interesting to read about. I also think this book, very much like Cemetery Boys, is very light on the fantasy aspect. It is being pitched as a fantasy. However, I do think the only fantastical element of this is truly the monster. Besides that, everything is pretty much set in a 1920s city. So I think it's definitely super easy to get into this if you want to get into fantasy. If you don't know where to start, I don't know if this is supposed to be like a series or a duology. I'm not quite sure, but this is the first book in a series. So definitely a good place to start to immerse yourself in something fantasy, but not overwhelming and with tons of world building. Definitely the place to go to. And the ending of this book threw me off a loop because it's not the most wild of endings. It's not like Tower of Dawn. It's not like Empire of Storms. It's so subtle. Like, the ending of this book is so subtle, but it still shakes you to the damn core. I was just sitting there being like, this cannot just end like this. And those are all the books that I have for you guys today. Those are my best books of 2020, all my favorite reads of this year. Comment down below what were some of your favorites that you read this year. I am always looking for like new recommendations, and honestly, some of you guys have been recommending incredible books, like I always say. So leave down below what were some of your favorite books, and if you reach the end of the video, let's leave some sword emojis down below, because I feel like all of the books in my top 5 revolves around swords or some sort of medieval weapon. So leave down below some sword emojis, and if you have yet to subscribe to my channel, don't forget to do so down below for more bookish content. I am constantly uploading videos that I am sure you do not want to miss. I am already planning out the content for 2021, and y'all are not even ready for this lineup of content, okay? I am also sprinting throughout the week, primarily on Fridays, which again, I'm gonna be trying out the morning sprint so more of you can join me. You can also follow me on all of my social medias, which are always linked down below. I have an Instagram, Twitter, Goodreads, and an Amazon wishlist in case you want to support me and my channel and gift me a book. I am 100% sure this is gonna be the last video of 2020. I cannot believe it's the end of the year, y'all. I cannot believe this is gonna be my last video of 2020. So this is gonna be the last video of the year, and like I always say, I just need to give you guys a huge thank you for everything that you have done, for all of the support. You guys are the absolute sweetest human beings out there. Every like, every comment, every subscribe, every share, every just sweet interaction that you guys have with me, all of the DMs, I appreciate that to no end, to know that my content is doing some good and that you guys are enjoying it. And I am truly here for you guys, for what you want to watch, for what content you are seeking. So I am just super excited to be here and to have created this little corner where we could just be ourselves, scream loudly and proudly that we are readers, and to just have the tons of fun that we usually have and all of the chaoticness. So I just really need to say one last time a huge thank you to all of you, because you guys have truly made my 2020 incredible in a year where everything was uncertain, where everything was dark and just scary, and you guys were truly the best thing, one of the best things to come out of this year. So I just needed to throw in a huge thank you again for all that you do, for all of the support, just for everything, because you guys are unmatched on the internet. And yeah, that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and the next time I'll be seeing you is on Friday, January 1st, 2021. I love you guys so much, and I will see you on the next one. Bye guys.